Sydney, so number one team so far, pretty clear on top of the ladder. We talked about them last week about how they're nailing the Premiership metrics as well. So the 5 stats in which 100% of the last 10 premiers have ranked in the top 6 in, if you can get your head around that mouthful. There were 6 of these stats last year, but we've whittled it back to 5 because Collingwood had a bit of an out-of-the-box season. And Sydney is clearly currently the best at nailing these. They are number 1 for the points against. They are number 1 for points against from turnover. They are 3rd for opposition points from forward half, so they're stopping scores.
Yeah.
They are 4th for moving the ball from defensive 50 to inside 50, and they are 3rd for the inside 50 differential for an aggregate of 12. But because the interesting thing that we've got for this season, and it's not, I feel like we kind of say this most seasons, but this season it seems quite close. There's currently just 1 win separating 3rd and 10th. So we've got a bit of wheat to sort from chaff here.
That might be close, but it is close every year. But is it just me or does Sydney feel a bit of a step above everyone else at the moment? I think everyone else seems to have a pretty obvious glaring issue. The Swans don't. And I reckon I've said it every week since, but that loss to Richmond is going to go, I don't know how that happened. We're going to get to the end of the year and think, what happened that day?
Yeah, it's a bit of a head scratcher. We were talking about this in the office yesterday about sort of, I was like, oh, someone mentioned, they were like, oh, who did Sydney lose to? And you go, it was Richmond.
Yeah.
What? Anyway, so Sydney currently sort of, I guess, leading the Premiership metrics, but we've got so many teams between, I guess, well, the Bombers clearly now in 2nd, but 3rd and 10th. Are there any teams that we should be looking for in that band that are to be taken more seriously than others?
Yeah, there is. So, as you said, with Sydney, what we did is you've called out their 5 ranks across the 5 key stats. So first plus 3rd plus 4th plus 3rd gives them an aggregate of 12.
Yep.
Their total ranking. So what I've done is just taken those 5 stats just to keep it simple. We have 32 different stats on the Premiership Standards report. Some of those 32, only 1 of the past 10 premiers have ranked top 6 in. Some of them are 8, some of them are 9. We're just looking at the 10 out of 10 ones.
So why keep those ones on if they don't really...
Again, the Premiership Standards report is for a club to look at their own profile and see, okay, what are we good at, what are we bad at? So we use it on this show to sort of try to predict a Premiership winner, and it's great for doing that. But it's also a club resource where it has the 32 main parts of a game that most teams are... And we say it every week, you can't look to dominate all 32 of those stats. You need to pick and choose what type of team you are.
Yep.
Identify, okay, these are the 20 stats that stick to our signature. These are the ones we're going to keep an eye on. But it's for all 18 clubs to use, so that's why there's so much stuff on it. But yeah, I'm starting to sort of worry about it this year. So we talked about Collingwood last year, had sort of flipped the Premiership Standards on the head. A lot of the things that you needed to rank top 6 in. Collingwood didn't rank top 6 in. They also, some of them they ranked outside the top 8, and they still won a premiership. So you sort of look at the numbers, you think, okay, is the game changing slightly that the Premiership Standards needs to be revisited? Getting to this stage of the season, and that query is still in the back of my head when I look at it, but I'm happy to sort of keep it and be proven wrong by the end of the year. So at the moment, behind Sydney, the next best team on the Premiership Standards is Brisbane, who I don't think is in that bracket of 2nd to 10 that you're actually talking about. So they're still 4th for points against, 3rd points against from turnover, 2nd for points scored from the opposition's forward half.
Lions currently 12th.
Yep, 3rd best ball movement and number 1 for inside 50 differential. So add those rankings up, they're on 13, which is only 1 behind Sydney. Yeah. So looking at those 5 main stats that Premiers have done well, Brisbane are dominating in each of those areas. And I look at it and sort of says, well, Chris Fagan knows what he's doing. He knows what a successful team does, and he knows how Brisbane is successful. They're still doing that. It's the execution. It's the goal kicking at one end, the accuracy down the other. There is a whole lot of sort of execution stats that are going against Brisbane. They're not executing, and their opposition is executing, almost above expected. So very interesting that Brisbane still comes up very high in they're playing the right type of game style, but the results are just not coming. So
do we think that they can still be a factor?
It's getting later and later. I've backed them every week because of these numbers. We're now at round 10 and they're still 12th, and we're talking about teams above them are all getting that extra win as well. There's no one sort of...
Because
you need 4 teams to fall down
around by
round.
injury, but they're still doing this despite the injury.
Yeah. So they've got, and that's why I can spin it the other way and say this is a bit of an issue for Brisbane, that they have one way of playing and it's definitely got them to to a grand final last year.
Sorry, Brisbane fans.
Yeah, you used the wrong word. They got to a grand final last year. This year they're still doing it, but they're sitting 12th. So do they need a complete overhaul of their system? Has the game, has their personnel changed where they need to change their game, or do they just keep sort of
So if
keep
they...
this is what we know, this is what we're doing well, it'll turn. How long do you wait for it to turn is the question that
Well, there was a
they're
team that was
asking.
15th after 15 rounds last
There
year.
were
and still
two, I
made
believe.
finals. Well, yes, but the 15th round was the latest. That one of them was bottom four.
Yep.
And still made finals. So there's time.
How many teams... So these 5 metrics that you guys read out before, they're the 5 most important. Is that
the
correct?
last 10 years, yep.
How many teams do you imagine by season's end would rank top 6 in all 5 of these? Would it be 2 teams, 3 teams?
Yeah, it should be around 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And it'll most likely be, the
So if
prelims or the grand finals.
this was if the year ended right now, this is the final round of the year, and Brisbane had all these ranks, but they finished the year 12th, would that, to your point, signal that
Blow it up.
it's...
Oh, I don't think you'd blow up the whole report, but it's just, it makes you revisit the numbers and you have to turn around why. Why is Brisbane not winning, And it is. Some of it might just come down to, and it's hard to say this of 10 weeks.
Yeah. And
they keep giving up the best accuracy of any team, and they've scored at the worst accuracy.
Yeah.
It's like, well, everything is happening right.
Bad luck.
Yeah, it's just coming down to that last final kick, and how much do you change? Because that's what I'm sort of saying, and that's why I'm lucky I'm not a coach. Chris Fagan's sort of sitting there, and he'll be looking at the same thing, going, everything I'm trying to do is working, but we're not winning. So do I need to try what I'm trying? Do I need to just stick fat and hope that it turns, or do I actually need to just go, bang, all of these things that we rank top 3 in, throw them out the window, we don't care about them. All these things that we rank bottom 4 in, let's try to fix those. So it might be contest or different things. So Brisbane one to watch. Bulldogs is the next best team as well.
Hang on, they're also outside of that
exactly,
top 10.
another
They're
team
11th.
that's not in the 8. So 5th for points against from turnover. So the fewest points scored from forward half chains by the opposition, the best team to move the ball from back 50 to forward 50, and the 4th best inside 50 differential, which gives them a count of 16 across those rankings. So
Below
along with
only
the Swans,
Sydney and Brisbane.
Yep, so Sydney, Brisbane, Bulldogs are the only 3 that sort of tick all, top 6 in all of those 5 stats.
Well, you said last week that the Dogs they are sexy with the numbers, but they just can't seem to either put it together for long enough on the field.
Yeah. They'll have 3 or 4 of the best wins for the season. They had the Richmond win last week was the biggest margin for a season.
I sort of flagged that. Do their numbers get inflated by some of these big wins?
They do, but again, we look at everything. When you look at a premiership team, it's across your season averages.
You've got something written down in these notes that I find fascinating. Well, so you've got the Bulldogs, a 3rd for points for and 5th for points against.
Yep.
It's the number for Sydney. I don't think people realise how good Sydney is.
So Sydney's first for points for and first for points against.
Like that's
nailing everything.
It's such a simple thing, and the score is the most. We always joke that yes, the score is the most important thing, and it is simple. But if you're the best team at scoring and the best team at defending, you're going to be the team.
Did they lose to again?
So Bulldogs and Swans being, Swans, as I said, 1st and 1st, Bulldogs 3rd and 5th. They're the only 2 teams to rank top 8 in both points for and points against. So that's what the biggest thing first thing I look at when I look at Premiership standard this year is only 2 teams. Sydney and Bulldogs are the only team that got a balance between offense and defense.
Yeah.
Geelong, heavily defensive. Carlton, a lot more sort of offense.
Carlton's defense.
So it's all sort of all over the shop. So there isn't, last year about this time we would have had the 4 or 5 teams where you're like, okay, Brisbane, Collingwood, Melbourne, Port, they're all nailing both sides of the ball, so put them into the prelim. This year when I look at it, as I said, that Sydney nailing both sides of the ball and Bulldogs. Bulldogs not in the 8 yet. Brisbane probably not dominating so much defensively, but all this sort of territory and getting their hands on the ball stuff. So it's one to watch where I look at the Premiership standards at the moment and think, oh, geez, it's not working quite well.
Maybe it is.
I'm happy to be surprised by the end of the year where we sort of go, oh, hang on, Bulldogs have gotten themselves to 6th. How did that happen? Well, the numbers had told us at round 10.
And look, I can see it. I think we're probably all in agreement that the Bulldogs and the Lions will probably finish the year higher than they are now. I don't think either of them are going to be dropping. But I think to my point at the top of this segment is that I think Sydney is quite clearly a step above everybody else. And it hasn't probably felt like this for maybe since Richmond's peak, where there's a team that felt like a fair way ahead right now. Yeah.
Just 2 teams I sort of wanted to quickly touch on that are probably down the other end of the scale. The Giants. So you look at the top 5 stats, 8th for points against, 12th for points against from turnover, 4th from opposition forward half scoring, so that's not too bad. 8th for ball movement, so 8th for defensive 50 to forward 50. And 14th for inside 50 differential. So you add all those up, as I said, Sydney were at a 12 when you add up all their rankings, Brisbane 13, GWS 46,
Okay.
sort of down in
Hot
the bottom.
start have
And
sort
this
of
is
faltered.
this is the year. This isn't like the last
Yeah.
4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, so the last, that's why I sort of flagged them. The last 4 or 5 weeks was probably, you could have almost, they weren't as dominant when they were sitting, first on the ladder early in the season. And Geelong are the other one, obviously, with 3 losses in a row now, and sort of probably, I think you spoke about in your 6 points, probably outplayed by Carlton across that game, but came away with the win.
Oh, don't get started.
So they're 13th for points against, 6th for points against from turnover, which they were number 1 in this stat and just got smacked. Gold Coast put 100 points on them and dropped them all the way down to 6th. So, but 11th for opposition points from forward half, 9th for moving the ball from back 50 to forward 50, and 13th for inside 50 differential, which gives them a cumulative score of 52, which is in the bottom 5 teams, looking at those 5 stats in isolation. So I think Giants and Geelong, again, with good sort of...
Writing them both off?
Not writing them both up, but a good sort of... The premiership standards, if you had looked at it 2 or 3 weeks ago, would have told you that they're not going as well.
For these 2 teams.
Well, in terms of they're not going to finish the top 2 teams like they were early in the season. They're still probably... They're a lot more bunched in the pack with the 2nd to 12 teams than early in the season.
I think
Really quickly before we move on, is there anything Sydney isn't doing particularly well that could still be improved? I mean, can we find even a little fault?
Yeah, look at the rankings. They're big, the lowest numbers. They're 13th overall for contested possession differential, 14th for winning at post-clearance differential, so winning it out in general play, and 15th for ground ball. So speak about those. They're a pretty important part of the games. You want to be the first to get it. I think Sydney is so clean when they have the ball that there isn't a lot of contest that they have to bother to win. But 2, they come up against the Giants, beat them by 16th. Beat them by 16 contested possessions. The Giants were 5th in that stat coming into the game, and they came up against Carlton, who were the number 1 team for contested possession differential just on the weekend, and beat them by 6.
That was the most
So
surprising
they've
thing.
proven that, it's not a big focus. We've got other parts of the game. But if we're going to come up against 2 good contest teams in Giants and Carlton, switch on for the day and beat them at it. They've done that. So, quick answer to what their weakness is. It's contest, but they've proven that they can pull it out when they need to.
If you had to put your balls on the line and say a team is winning the flag this year, would it be Sydney right now?
If I had to pick someone right this moment, I think, it would be. I mean, obviously there's a lot of water to go under the bridge, a lot of injuries. We don't know what will happen. There's a long way to go. But I think the other part of Sydney is we've spoken so much about Isaac Heeney and how great his year has been thus far. But Sydney were already a really good team last year with a good midfield balance, good team balance, really.
Yeah.
And then what he's doing this year, he is producing Brownlow medal numbers right now, this is in the first half-ish of the year. It's the equivalent of taking a good side from last year, I don't know, Carlton or someone like that, and dropping in Lachie Neale, who won the Brownlow, and then just adding him to that team too. Now, probably Carlton's not the best example because Lachie Neale, probably not the exact player Carlton needs. But the point is, you're dropping in maybe the best player in the comp into a team that was already good because you weren't getting this production from him last year. And you do that for any good team, and you're going to take it. Obviously, they're doing a lot of things right, but I think from a personnel and playing point of view, I think that has been enormous for them. And then everyone else has come along for the ride. I think Chad Warner had a down-ish year last year. I was so big on him after the grand final performance he had.
Will Hayward in a contract year. James Rowbottom, one of the best tackle contested players.
Nick Blakey, one of the best general defenders.
Didn't have Tom McCartan on the weekend.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to like. Now, the only question I have or query is, who will be the young, inexperienced-ish key forward that will be the one that can there be one? Does there need to be one? Can it be all three of them?
Yeah, that's why it's
McDonald and McLean. Can they all take? Can they all kick 2?
I think they
can.
do.
This is what they've been doing.
Is that the secret? Is that the recipe? Rather than pinning your hopes on someone to kick 4 or 5,
I think you've nailed it in terms of what you're talking about. It's the team balance, and it's why I personally got Sydney so wrong. I had them as one of my biggest slider because I looked at the team balance, thought they're all a bit too plain and vanilla, and they're all But it's the opposite for me now. When I watch them, I'm like, well, yes, Heaney's going to probably win the Brownlow, and he's clearly a star of the competition. But exactly, the rest of them all just fit in perfectly. Hayward doesn't have to be the best at anything, but he fits in next to Goulden, who fits in down the line from Blakey, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a team balance.
Do you bring Buddy back?
Let's move on.